My dad said I was a drama queen. Not in a funny way, he meant it like an insult. To him, my tears were performances. My dreams, just noise. So when I cried after losing a school play audition, he told me to cut the act and banned me from theater altogether. But I wasn't acting. That pain was real. And so was the fire he lit in me. He thought he was shutting me down. What he really did was send me on stage with the loudest, most honest performance of my life. And this time, he couldn't look away. Growing up, I didn't dream of becoming a princess or a doctor. I dreamed of spotlights, velvet curtains, and standing ovations. I was the kind of kid who turned the living room into a stage, used a broomstick as a microphone, and reenacted scenes from movies until I got the tears just right. For me, storytelling wasn't a hobby. It was how I breathed. But in my house, dreams like that were treated like dust, something to sweep away, so we could get back to real life. My dad was a numbers guy. He worked in insurance, believed in spreadsheets, and treated emotions like bad investments. He wasn't mean exactly, but he believed in logic, discipline, and utility. If something didn't generate income or fix a leaky faucet, it wasn't worth his attention. So when I told him at age 10 that I wanted to be an actress, he looked at me like I said I wanted to be a unicorn. "Be serious, Tessa," he said. "You're smart. Don't waste it pretending to be someone else." That was his word, pretending. To him, acting was a lie wrapped in glitter. He didn't see the truth behind it, the raw, bleeding honesty that only came when someone dared to feel something in front of strangers. My mom, well, she was quieter. She'd give me a small smile, sometimes sneak into the back row of my school plays. But she never stood up for me. Never told my dad to ease up or let me explore what made me feel alive. She just folded the laundry and avoided the tension. Despite that, I kept performing. Middle school talent shows, drama club, regional workshops, anywhere they'd let me be someone else for a few minutes. I lived for rehearsals, for the way my heart pounded when the curtain rose. It was the only place I felt completely unapologetically myself. But every show came with a price. If my dad found out I'd skipped a family dinner for rehearsal, he'd go cold, silent treatment, sometimes lectures about priorities or wasting potential. He never came to my performances, not once. He said watching teenagers pretend to cry wasn't his thing. I tried to brush it off, told myself he didn't understand, but a part of me desperately wanted him to see me, not the perfect daughter who got straight A's and loaded the dishwasher, but the version of me that lit up on stage. The version that felt real. Everything came to a head during sophomore year of high school. There was an open audition for the lead in our school's spring musical. I wanted it so badly. I stayed up memorizing monologues, practicing songs until my voice cracked. But when the cast list went up, my name wasn't there. I didn't even get a supporting role. I cried, right there in the hallway. I wasn't being dramatic. I was crushed. It felt like the universe had looked me in the eye and said, "You're not enough." That night at dinner, I tried to talk about it. I barely got 2 sentences in before my dad slammed his fork down. "For God's sake, Tessa," he snapped, "do you have to turn everything into a performance? This is why I can't take you seriously. Stop acting and grow up." He didn't yell often, but when he did, it stung. I sat there stunned. My mom looked away, and in that moment, I realized something. To him, my pain was just noise. He didn't see a broken heart. He saw a girl playing victim for attention. 2 days later, he pulled me out of drama club, said I needed to focus on real opportunities, that I should spend more time preparing for college applications, not singing in costumes. That was the first time I ever hated him. Not because he didn't support me, but because he didn't believe me. Didn't believe that theater could be more than pretend. Didn't believe that Tessa could make something real out of it. For a while, I obeyed. I went to class. I studied. I kept my head down and buried the part of me that ached to create. But it didn't go away. It festered. And every time I saw a Broadway poster or heard a line from a movie that made me feel something, I thought of my dad's voice saying, "Stop acting." That voice followed me into college. It sat beside me when I picked a safe major. It whispered in my ear every time I imagined auditioning again. But something inside me refused to die. And someday soon, I was going to prove to him and to myself that I wasn't acting. I was living. College was supposed to be a fresh start. New people, new city, no parents breathing down my neck. I'd picked a state school close enough to home to keep the peace, but far enough that my weekends were my own. My major business? Because theater isn't a career according to my dad. But my minor was undeclared. That was my loophole. That was where I hid the part of me he hadn't killed off yet. It started small. A flyer on a bulletin board, open casting call for student-run theater. No credits, no pay, just passion. I stood outside the door for 20 minutes before walking in. And when I did, it felt like oxygen rushing back into my lungs. I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding my breath. The production was small, a one-act play about grief and silence, but they gave me a role. It wasn't the lead, but it was something. And when I stepped onto that tiny stage for the first time in years, something inside me lit up again. That first round of applause. It didn't fill the hole in my chest, but it reminded me I still had a voice. For the next few months, I lived a double life. By day, I was the model student, spreadsheets, presentations, group projects. But at night, I slipped into black box theaters and dusty rehearsal rooms, memorizing lines and losing myself in characters that felt more like home than my dorm room ever did. I didn't tell my dad, not because I was afraid of being scolded. I was afraid he'd look at me the same way he did when I cried after losing that audition, like I was pathetic, like my pain, my passion were embarrassing. We talked on the phone once a week. He asked about classes, grades, internships. He liked hearing words like marketing and finance. I gave him what he wanted to hear, but then I got cast in a regional student showcase. It wasn't just campus level. Directors from around the state would be there, even some Broadway scouts. I was offered a lead. The girl who was told she was wasting her time. It was the biggest opportunity of my life. And it was scheduled the same weekend as Thanksgiving. I told my parents I couldn't make it home. I said I had a project due. My mom sounded disappointed but understanding. My dad wasn't. He called me the next morning. "You skipping Thanksgiving for a group project?" he asked, voice sharp. I hesitated. Then I lied. "Yeah, it's a major part of my grade." Silence. Then, "You're lying." My stomach dropped. "I looked up your course schedule. You don't have anything due that weekend, so tell me the truth." "Tessa, what are you doing?" My hands were sweating. I stared at the script on my desk, highlighted and creased. "I got a role," I admitted, "in a student showcase. It's kind of a big deal." There was a pause. Then came the laugh. Not a warm laugh. The kind that says I expected nothing more. Jesus, Tessa. Still chasing that fantasy. What part of real life don't you get? "It's not a fantasy," I said quietly. "It's theater. It's pretend. You're wasting your time and mine. I'm not asking for anything from you." I snapped. "Just support." He scoffed. "Support? You want me to clap for you while you throw away your future? I felt something crack. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm building something. You just don't want to see it because it doesn't look like your version of success. You want to play adult? Then act like one. Pick a real path. Or don't bother coming home. I stared at the phone, my ears ringing. Then I hung up. That night, I packed a small duffel bag and moved into my friend Mara's basement. It was cold, cramped. I slept on a futon next to a leaky boiler. But I could breathe. I told Mara everything. And when I cried, she didn't say I was being dramatic. She handed me tissues and said, "Screw him. You're not pretending, you're surviving." I performed in the showcase that weekend. It wasn't perfect. My hands shook. But something in me clicked, like my body remembered what it was built for. After the show, a woman approached me. She was a director for an off-Broadway program scouting young talent. She gave me her card and said, "You have something raw, something real. Don't let anyone dim that." I clutched that card like a lifeline. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Maybe my dad was right. Maybe I was a drama queen. But drama queens built kingdoms too. Living in Mara's basement wasn't glamorous. The ceiling dripped when it rained, and sometimes we had to bang the heater to get it to work. But every night, when I walked back from rehearsal, mascara smudged and feet aching, I felt more alive than I ever had. I juggled 3 part-time jobs, one at the campus cafe, one at the library, and one ushering shows at a local theater downtown. I barely slept. My grades were decent, but not perfect, and I lived off microwaved mac and cheese and peanut butter toast. But on the stage, I burned bright. The off-Broadway director who gave me her card, her name was Carla Reyes. She followed through. She invited me to workshop a small show that summer. No pay, no promise. Just a chance. So I took it. My friends went home for break. I stayed. I commuted 2 hours every day, taking 2 buses and a train. I rehearsed in worn-out sneakers and borrowed costumes. I slept on the studio floor more than once. But people started noticing me. Carla said I had emotional accuracy, that I made people feel things they didn't know they needed to feel. One night after rehearsal, she pulled me aside and said, "You're not just good, Tessa. You're necessary." Those words stayed with me, especially on the nights I questioned everything, because there were many. I'd scroll past Instagram photos of old high school classmates in internships, weddings, new cars. Meanwhile, I was washing my only black shirt in a sink. And my dad? He hadn't called since Thanksgiving. My mom tried to reach out, texted sometimes, sent photos of the dog. But she never mentioned him. It was like he'd cut me out of the family photo entirely. One day, Mara got a call from her landlord. Apparently, having an unregistered tenant violated her lease. I had to go. I packed my bags again. I spent 2 nights couch surfing. Then by some miracle, one of the crew members in Carla's theater knew a stage manager who needed a roommate. It was a cramped 2-bedroom in Queens with paper-thin walls. But rent was cheap, and I had a bed. I picked up another job, this time bartending, which came in handy because that's where I met Logan. He was a playwright, intense brooding, and always scribbling in napkins. He saw me reading a script one night and said, "You an actor?" I laughed. "Trying to be." He smiled. "Good. I'm trying to write for people like you." We became inseparable. He wrote. I acted. We stayed up until 3 a.m., dissecting lines and crying over character arcs. He made me feel seen. And then, one day, he asked if I'd read for the lead in his new show. It was small indie, with a cast of 4. But the role, it was electric. The character was vulnerable, messy, proud, just like me. The show debuted at a downtown festival. Low budget, but well attended. Logan's writing was sharp. My performance, I'd like to believe, matched it. A reviewer from an underground theater blog called my work guttingly raw. Another said I had the kind of eyes that made lies impossible. It wasn't Broadway, but it was a step. Months passed. I started getting callbacks. Not big ones, bit-part student films voiceovers, but enough to build a reel. Carla invited me to read in more workshops. I got better at networking, more confident in audition rooms. I still worked 2 jobs. Still counted every dollar. But I was in it. One night, I got an email. Subject line Broadway reading opportunity, lead role consideration. At first, I thought it was spam. But then I saw the sender. Carla. She'd pitched a show she'd been workshopping for years, and it was greenlit for a Broadway preview. The producers wanted someone fresh. Someone real. Carla wanted me. I screamed so loud the neighbors banged on the wall. The reading was in 2 weeks. Rehearsals were brutal. Long hours, tough scenes. The role was emotionally exhausting, a daughter trying to prove herself to an emotionally absent father. I didn't even have to act. Every line was like opening a scar. One day, during rehearsal, Carla came up to me with tears in her eyes. "You bring something to this character that no one else has," she said. "You are her." Opening night was set for early spring. Broadway. My name wasn't on the marquee, but I was in the playbill. I wanted to tell my mom. Wanted her to come to see what I'd built with nothing but grit and grief. So I did. I called her. When she answered, her voice cracked. "Tessa, I got a part," I said, trying to sound casual. She paused. "Another showcase?" "No," I said. "Broadway." Silence. Then softly, "Oh, honey." She started crying. She said she'd come. And then she said, "Do you want me to tell your father?" I hesitated. Then, "No, I'll tell him myself." Except I didn't. Not right away. The week before opening night, I mailed him a ticket. No note, no explanation. Just a front row seat. I don't know what I expected. Maybe silence. Maybe he'd throw it away. But on the night of the premiere, as I stood backstage, heart pounding in my chest, I peeked through the curtain, and there he was, row a center seat, wearing the same stiff blazer he used to wear to parent-teacher conferences. Hands clasped, jaw tight. He looked older, smaller. The lights dimmed, the curtain rose. I stepped into the spotlight, and for 2 hours, I bled. Every wound, every memory, every shouted, "You're being dramatic?" I gave it all to the stage. There was a scene, one that mirrored my own life too closely, where the daughter screamed at her father, "You taught me how to hide myself, not how to be myself." And when I delivered that line, I looked straight at him. Our eyes met. He didn't flinch, but his eyes glistened. When the show ended, the applause was thunderous. People stood, cried, cheered, and my father, my stoic, unsmiling, logical father, he stood too. Hands shaking, tears on his cheeks. I took my bow, and when I looked back up, he mouthed something to me. I couldn't hear it, but I saw it. "I'm sorry." After the standing ovation, I didn't go straight out to greet the audience. I slipped into the dressing room, sat down at the mirror, and let the silence press in. My castmates hugged, laughed, cried. But I sat still, staring at my reflection. Makeup smudged hair, wild chest still heaving. It felt like I had just survived a storm I'd been walking through my entire life. I didn't know if my dad would wait. Part of me thought he'd quietly slip away, disappear, before I could reach him. But when I stepped into the lobby, he was there, standing alone, hands in pockets, eyes puffy but clear. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he opened his mouth, then closed it. He was never good with emotions, and now it was like they were choking him. Finally, he said, "You were magnificent." I wanted to laugh, not out of mockery, but because I had waited my whole life to hear something like that. And now that it came, it felt surreal, almost like a dream I might wake from. "Thanks," I said softly. He stepped closer, awkward, like a man walking through fog. I didn't know it meant that much to you." I tilted my head. "I tried to tell you. I thought I was protecting you," he said. "From disappointment, from failure, from wasting time." "You called my dream a joke," I replied. "Not bitter, just honest." He flinched as if the truth burned. I waited. Then he said, "You were right to leave. You were right to chase it. I see that now." That sentence was the twist, because I had spent years trying to prove myself. I thought the victory would be fame, recognition, a spotlight. But standing there hearing him admit he was wrong, that was the real karma. I could have told him off. I had every right. Could have listed every time he made me feel small, dismissed, invisible. But instead, I asked, "Why'd you come?" He took a breath. "Your mother showed me the ticket. I almost threw it away. But curiosity got the better of me. I had to see what you'd built. And now," he paused. Now I wish I'd listened years ago." There it was. My revenge didn't need to be cruel. It was quiet, elegant. The kind that stings more because it's wrapped in truth. He gestured toward the poster behind me, the Broadway marquee with my face on it. "You really did it," he said. I nodded. "Without your blessing." He looked down. "I know." Another pause. Then he pulled something from his pocket. A folded photo me, at 5 years old, wearing a tutu and a cardboard crown arm stretched like a ballerina. "I kept this in my wallet," he said. "The whole time." I stared at it. "That was the day you said I was too dramatic for preschool." He chuckled a little embarrassed. "I was a fool." "Maybe," I said, "but fools can learn." He looked up. "I'd like to come again. To more shows, if that's okay." I didn't say yes, not yet. Instead, I said, "We'll see." Because karma, when done right, doesn't close the door. It lets the other person knock and decide how long they're willing to wait. Later that night, I sat on the rooftop of my apartment building. Logan joined me, 2 mugs of tea in hand. He wrapped an arm around me and said, "So how's it feel? Conquering your demons under a spotlight." I smiled, like a storm finally passed. He raised his mug. To storms and survivors. We toasted, and in that quiet, breezy night, under the hum of city lights, I realized something. My pain wasn't wasted. It had shape now. A voice, a rhythm, and it echoed in every person who saw my performance and whispered I felt that too. That was my revenge. Not fame, not applause, but transformation. I turned rejection into power, silence into expression, dismissal into a standing ovation. A week later, Carla called. Producers wanted to extend the show, maybe even record a cast album. Interviews were lining up. Magazine shoots, a feature piece titled "From Drama Queen to Broadway Star." I laughed when I read the headline, because once those words were an insult, now they were my brand. I took my pain, every scoff, every restriction, every cold look from my father, and turned it into art. And people listened. At the first matinee, after our opening, I noticed something unusual in the crowd. Rows, filled with teenagers, teachers, parents. Apparently, schools were bringing their drama students to see the show, to see me. A girl once told to be realistic, now the reason another girl believed she could dream. That day after the curtain call, I stayed to talk to them. One kid about 13 said, "My dad says acting's useless, but watching you made me feel like maybe it's not." I looked her in the eyes and said, "It's not, and neither are you." As they left, I remembered something my father said years ago. "You'll never make a living playing pretend." He was wrong. I wasn't pretending. I was revealing, exposing, living. Months passed since that night on Broadway. My life felt different, lighter somehow. Not because I had finally made it, but because I had finally forgiven myself. Dad and I didn't instantly become best friends. There were still awkward silences, missed calls, and some days when his pride got in the way. But for the first time, there was respect, a fragile new bridge slowly being built. One afternoon, I found a note slipped under my apartment door. It was from him. "I'm proud of you, Tessa, not just for what you do on stage, but for who you've become. If you'll have me, I want to learn how to be your dad again." I smiled, holding back tears. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't about winning the battle, it's about healing the wounds. I realized my journey wasn't just about proving my dad wrong. It was about proving to myself that my dreams mattered, that my passion wasn't a weakness, that the voice inside me, the one that screamed to be heard, was powerful enough to change my world. Standing on that Broadway stage wasn't just the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. One where I owned my pain, my art, and my truth. Where drama queen became my crown, not a curse. And as the curtain falls on this chapter, I know this much is true. Sometimes the harshest critics turn out to be the ones cheering the loudest once you show them you're unstoppable.